Well, if you can keep the terms straight and everybody else straight, we'll be doing good.
Yeah, that's the hard part. All right,
Got
you
it.
guys ready to debate the merits of your heresy?
Bruh.
Hi, welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today is our red dial, the future dial, the eschatology, the prophecy as far as the end times goes dial. So this will be a really exciting one. I'm excited. It's been a long journey. It's been 2 months, I think, since the first episode that we put out on this series. So it's been quite a journey. And I have learned a lot on the way. And your dog is back there playing the keyboard.
She's learning to play the keyboard.
Yeah. So that's fun. So this will be a great I think conversation. We're going to do next episode. We're going to recap and we're going to go through all of them. We're going to sort of make an outline of what the book would look like with key points, key takeaways, all the highs and lows already worked out. So we're not going to be brainstorming through it like we have been. It's not going to be next week. It'll probably be the weekend after that because next week is Thanksgiving. And then I would like to do an episode after that where we actually take the list of I found a list of like 300 denominations. I filtered it out because some of it was kind of repetitive. So there's like almost 100, I think 170 denominations, and we will put ranges on all of it. I think that'll be a fun episode, and we may cut it down and only do about 50 denominations, but I'd like to actually kind of map it on there. And then after that, that will be this whole series. So we can maybe after that at some point, after the book comes out, we'll do some more things and we might go into some topics within these dials and kind of go through it there. But anyway, that was a very long introduction. So let's just get into the topic today. So I wrote a little bit on this one and we'll see how I didn't practice this before. So this is all just typing today. So it might not be extremely coherent, but before Jesus and Messiah came, there were prophecies as far back as the Garden of Eden about the one who would crush the head of the serpent. After then, time after time, prophecies were given, and you see layers unfolding. When Christ came, the Messiah came, he fulfilled hundreds of prophecies, and he came so that we might be saved. We know this is an eternal salvation. We know this is an eternal salvation and not entirely an earthly one, because we're still here. We're not just we're not in the kingdom, even though he has come. And so we see that as already, but not yet sort of, I won't say partial fulfillment, but hopefully you can kind of see what I'm saying there. And to what degree. And that's the core of this dial. To what degree is the kingdom now? So we're going to be talking a lot about where to place the millennium. For the uninitiated, the millennium is in Revelation 20. I think it's 20 or 21. But it's in the very, very end. It's like there's a millennial reign where Jesus comes back to reign on this earth for 1,000 years. And so the whole debate is, are we in that? Are we waiting for that? What is that all about? And so that's what this dial is going to place you. You're going to be able to find your place on this dial depending on where you place that millennium. Now there's whole systems that come into play with where you put that. And then we're going to see that there's implications based on those systems on what you say. So that's why it's important. It looks like we lost Paul. That's strange.
Nope, still here.
Oh, well, your camera died.
Yes,
so
stepping away for a minute.
So this will be, we're not going to go through every single detail of every single eschatology or system that exists, because that would be a 22-hour episode and we would all die. And I don't want to kill us or our audience. So we're not going to do that.
Thank you.
Do what?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But we do kind of have to sort of go through them a little bit and kind of just hit the waves, so to speak, so that we can place it in the dial so you can plug in, so that anybody reading this book that has any kind of you will, if you're uninitiated, like I said, you'll be able to kind of say, okay, this is kind of where my church falls in. Or if you have a well-developed eschatology, you'll be able to say, yeah, this is where I'm at on this dial, and I can see how it fits. And we'll try to get history along the way. So let's see. One thing that I wanted to mention that I felt like that I put in this as well. One of the core, it's the core of the dial. There's second coming. About in regards to this partial fulfillment, I mean, I think that it's pretty clear, concept when in places like Isaiah 7:14, where he said prophesies that a virgin will give birth to a son, and by the time he's grown up, this will take place. Well, when Jesus comes, obviously we see that as that was fulfilled in that time, that prophecy Isaiah had to that king. And there's also, that was a prophecy about Jesus, the Messiah. There's lots of Psalms where talking about the son of David who will build the temple, but then it goes on and explains more about what this son of David's going to do. And you go, okay, well, Solomon, who's David's son, built the temple, but he didn't do all these things, and he's not the Messiah. So there's this already fulfillment, and then there's another fulfillment that is being looked forward to. So that is one of the principles that I think that all systems can really latch onto, and it can be a very unifying thing if we let it, because I've seen in getting prepared for this episode, lots and lots of debates on end times and eschatology, and there's all sorts of disagreements, but I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that, and I think if we start there, I think it's a very unifying thing. So let's see. Then you have another aspect that I think that we need to acknowledge in as we're going through this is when Paul the apostle in 1 Corinthians 2 says that if the rulers of the age had known the plan, they would have never crucified Jesus. There are mysteries that are not explained on purpose, but it's not a secret that is hidden. It's a mystery, and we're invited to explore the depths of this mystery. I heard that quoted on somewhere in there, the difference between a secret and a mystery is a secret is something that is suppressed, is not shared, is not meant to be spread. A mystery is, if you read a mystery novel, you're invited into the mystery. If you're going and the mysterious island and you're searching out, there's it's the difference between unknowing something or not knowing something and be invited into finding and discovery, but acknowledging that there are things you don't understand, or secrecy, which is you're not supposed to know this. It's not like God's like trying to, it's like, no way, you're not, you wrote it in there and we're supposed to know it, and it is supposed to be.
I like that. I like that analogy, and I like the fact that, like a lot of prophecy, they knew what was going to happen. They just didn't know the details, quite what it would look like. And I think that's part of eschatology too. It will one day be, clear, and we'll look back and say, oh, that's what that meant. We couldn't understand it. I heard about the internet, and you can be anywhere in your house and you can connect to the internet wirelessly, and I thought, like, I will never see that in my lifetime. I don't even know what, that is, Bill Gates had it, well, 6 months later, I'm connected wirelessly to the internet, and it was like, wow, this is pretty neat. It's one of those things where you don't understand, you hear about something and it's a mystery. People are talking about it, but you don't quite really get it until you have that aha moment. Oh, that's what that means.
Yeah.
Sort of like building your IKEA It's like, oh, that's how it goes together.
You see the instructions, but there's
Yeah.
something about actually putting it together and when you see it all come into pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that that good comments. Paul, do you have any comments on those first two things that I said, the sort of double fulfillment and then the mystery of it all aspect? Any comments?
Yeah, double fulfillment for sure. Multiple fulfillment. I kind of sit more in a multiple fulfillment view, but um, and Western Christianity's, we're not great with mystery. We excel at our theological T's and I's being dotted and crossed, but not being able to quantify and qualify everything is something that we struggle with, or not being okay with things not being qualified and quantified is something we struggle with. It's just part and parcel of Western culture, and so regardless of how tightly you hold the eschatological position you have, at the end of the day, um, much like a whole lot of things in a whole lot of theology in our faith, um, we have to allow room for mystery, um, because what we have is an infinite God that is writing through, in this case, the Apostle John, to finite mortal beings. And God is describing at our level what he wants us to know, what he needs us to know about apocalyptic seasons of life. And it's not always going to, it's just not going to make sense. You can't read it literally, you have to read it literarily. You have to read it with um, all of the nuance and uh, points of reference. And if my dog would stop chewing on stuff, I wouldn't lose my train of thought.
That's okay.
Well, while you're trying to get your train of thought back,
Yeah.
one of my college professors used an illustration or an analogy of when you look off in the distance and you see a mountain range. It looks like one big hill, but as you get closer to it, you see that there's multiple hills. You go over this hill and then there's another hill and another hill and then there's this big hill, but from a distance it looks like one. As you get closer to it's two. And he said, there's in the book of Daniel, there's 3 or 4 desolations of what's that word?
The abomination that causes
Abomination of desolation. Yeah. There's at least 3, if maybe not 4. And, just a first reading, you may be thinking it's all talking about one event, where if you look through history up to now, it seems like there's been a couple of events that, might fit that, and that there may be yet one in the future too, that maybe that's not fully, fulfilled. It's just one of the mountains within the range. And that's what we mean by sometimes it's almost not yet, that you talked about John Mark earlier.
Yeah.
Or not almost.
Already, but not yet.
Already, but not yet.
Yeah. So let's get into what the things are on the dials, because a lot of this conversation will come up within this, and we'll cover it. So I think I sent you guys a picture of what's on the dials, but I think I changed it a little bit after I sent that picture. So, but not much. I just slid some things around. But at the top of the dial, no matter what I sent it, I would call the historical dispensationalist or the historicist dispensationalist is 10. It's going to be the top. And the reason why this is at one end is that a historical dispensationalist will put almost all of the entirety of the book of Revelation and the things in that book of Revelation, as far as dealing with prophecies there, in the future, in the end times, right before the millennium. It's kind of like all these things happen, the millennial reign, 1,000 years, and we go, that's the end of the earth, so to speak. So that would be why that's at the top. At the bottom of this is a hyper preterist. There aren't many of these around. I kind of debated even putting this on the list, but it does exist as a position, a historical position. So I figured I'd put it on here. It would be a hyper preterist. This is someone that believes that everything in Revelation is completely done, and even the second coming of Jesus, he came back, and this is it. We're living in the rest of history in this condition. That's not obviously very common held belief, and some people would say that it goes against many positions in the Bible. Of course, obviously the second coming and everything, what we're looking forward to, all of the hope. So that might actually be a 0 on this dial. I don't know. But next, above that would be the amillennialist that everything except for the millennium is, well, we're in the millennium currently, and everything except for the second coming is all we're looking forward to. A post-millennialist would be someone who is, we are either in the millennium right now, and it's not a actual physical 1,000 years. It's just a long, long time until Christ returns, and things are going to get better and better and better. And then the second coming will happen at some point when the time is right, according to the system. Then there is next on my dial anyway is pan-millennialist. That's just what I call them. They are the people that it could be premillennial, could be postmillennial, could be dispensational, could be whatever. Jesus is coming back, and I'm here for it. It's all going to pan out. That's why the pan-millennial is
yeah. And that's not a historical view per se, but that
is a position within many churches. That's where a lot of people sit.
Don't know how this is all going to work out, but whatever pans out.
It is a position. So that's 5. That's like a neutral position. That's, I'll just agree with, if I'm in a premillennial context, I'm going to shake my head. If I'm in a postmillennial context, I'll shake my head, Yes and amen.
And I think every other eschatological position would tell you that it will pan out just like God intends for it to. So there's a sense that we're all pan-millennialist.
Yeah.
Some of us are just brave enough to take a position.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah, I was going to say too at this point, John Mike, since we were talking about denominations and all, for some denominations, there are some denominations that are definitely, almost 100%, 90%, whatever, in a particular position. If you attend that church, that's what's taught. That's what the belief is. And they may, of course, teach the other views, but they definitely give, this is our position and why. There are other denominations that you'll find people on various parts of that dial, and everybody's okay with that. They're comfortable with that. There's discussion, there's debate, but it's not where the church may not have a formal creed or something along that line, but it's certainly part of the fabric of what they teach. You're going to hear it. you know, as you attend that church there, and as the correct view.
Mm-hmm. And in the same way where the spirit dial is somewhat the same way, where you're going to hear about does the church teach that you should be speaking in tongues and prophesying, or does it preach that
Right.
this is something that, was a gift of the apostles? Now we're in a different, sort of age or whatever when the canon closed. I mean, so these are all sort of teachings, but they're so fundamental with how you think about everything. With the church dial, is the church just as high authority as Scripture? That's something, within churches, or is it supposed to be all on me to figure out what do I believe on? Am I Calvin? Am I Calvinist? Am I, what do I believe on my eschatology? What do I believe on this, that, and the third? You are somebody said it's theology a la carte. You just grab, whatever you want and putting it into your own thing.
Yeah, and I would say most, as far as a dial, I think the other dials are stronger positions within a denomination. They're much stronger how a church feels about the church authority, or the Spirit and gifts and things like that. Where eschatology, just by its very nature, is not quite a we're have the color is not as dark, of the dial. There's not as generally a deep of conviction, although I think there used to be when it came to dispensationalists. It was very strong.
I'm gonna push back
View.
completely.
Okay, you think it is? Well,
No,
maybe,
I think because
I
what you were
could see
about to
that,
say,
yeah.
a dispensationalist, I think that's also true in the Presbyterian tradition. I think it matters very, very much on what you're saying about the kingdom. When you're talking about the kingdom, is it now? Is it something we're working towards? What are we doing? What's our mission? And that's where we're going to get into implications here in a minute. Let me just go up the rest of the dial real quick, and then we'll talk about them a little bit more. So after that, I have a progressive premillennialist. This would be a position that I just recently found out actually has a name. Before this, I don't know what I was calling it, like double premillennial or something. I don't know what I was calling it. But a progressive premillennials, where they see this sort of already but not yet thing happening, but it's going to get worse at some point, and then God's going to come back and establish this 1,000-year reign. So it's premillennial, but you put a lot of things into this already happened basket. That's sort of like all of these positions have like subcategories in it, where you can be in different places along the way. And then you have an idealist premillennial, which is very much the idealist position is you look at like I think Paul had said earlier, is apocalyptic language. So you're looking for ways to sort of make it fit, but you still think that there's a lot coming in the future. The historical premillennial is looking for a more literal interpretations of when it says this means this. We can translate it into something a lot more physical. And then you have your dispensationalist at the top, like I said. So part of this that I want to kind of say is whereas everybody also unites around this already but not yet kind of concept, because we see it in Jesus, we see it, like there. But we also have this tendency, I think, to in both systems, whether you're pre or post mill, and amillennial is a post mill position. It's on the lower side of this dial as well, just by definition. But and definition how we've laid this dial out as well. But you're both looking for literal interpretations of certain text, but someone on the lower end of this dial, a post millennials, will say, yes, that literally happened in the first century before the destruction of Jerusalem, and it literally happened in these ways. And a premillennialist will often say, we're looking for it to literally happen in the future in this and this and this way. And so how this plays out, we'll get into implications in a second. I'll stop there and let you guys pick apart my dial or agree or disagree or move things around, whatever. That's what this is
You
for.
may have to mute when you're not talking, Paul.
Oh, why? Because she's talking?
Yeah, she's
Come on. Hey.
Not that bad on my end, but yeah, any issues with where things are on this or how it's labeled?
So I would say move the full preterist onto 0,
Okay.
because literally every other eschatological position is generally accepted as an orthodox um, evangelical position.
Fair enough.
But-
I've actually at
but-
one point did that and then I forgot to do it, and it's on there at this current iteration. But yeah,
None of those look at full preterism as anything orthodox. But if you would throw under, make number 1 orthodox preterism and then 0 full preterism.
what's the difference between Orthodox preterism and Amil?
Orthodox or partial preterism, it's the same thing. What's the difference?
Yeah.
The Orthodox preterist view, or the partial preterist view, is the one thing we're waiting on that's left is the return of Christ. Everything's fulfilled enough that we're just now waiting for Jesus to show up and say, "New age guys, here we go."
Okay. And that's similar to the amillennial. But the amillennial will,
from my understanding of it, post-millennialism is a big umbrella, and you can have post-mill or partial preterist, and at one time amillennialism was part of that big umbrella, and it's kind of separated into a middle space between pre and post.
okay. No, that's great. That's good. That's helpful. Okay. Partial idealist, amillennial. Then I've got a preterist amillennial. Then I got a post.
And the interesting thing about progressive dispensationalism is that from what I understand, and I haven't looked at this one in legitimately in decades, is that progressive dispensationalism is like a stepping stone towards amillennialism.
Yeah.
It's certainly one of the newer of the pre-mill categories. But it can be, from what I understand, it can be a stepping stone to an amillennial viewpoint.
Well, a lot of people say amillennial is stepping stone to post-millennial as well when you're coming out.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and just lay our cards on the table. That's always fun. So where are you guys on the dial? If we're accepting this as more or less the range here, what would you? I know where we're generally going to land, but I'm curious to see what you guys would say. So go ahead, Dad.
Yeah, I'm on the premillennial side, but I guess I would fall in that category that is now being called
Progressive premillennial.
Progressive. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a historic premillennial as well that kind of still does the well, yeah, no, you're fine. Sorry, I'm trying to clarify something that really doesn't need.
When it comes to the rapture, I believe that there will be a rapture. I'm just not quite sure where I would place it. I'm not totally convinced that Christians won't go through the persecution and all the things that go on during the mark of the beast and things like that. I'm not convinced absolutely that Christians won't go through those things and see those 7 years of judgment and things and all. it could be, it may not be. There are some real questions about, if you know when the rapture happens, you can figure out when other things are going to happen. So I don't know.
Yeah. And Paul, I assume you're a post millennial.
I would be partial or orthodox preterist.
Oh,
It would
okay.
it would be a form of postmillennialism. I'm I hold that the book of Revelation was written in the AD 60s and not in the AD 90s, which I think every Amil I've ever encountered, and I know in premillennialism, they hold to an AD 90s authorship. Everybody believes it was written by the Apostle John.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times the dating is a big thing. And for any of the post-mill and partial preterist sort of things to work well, or maybe even at all, you have to be that earlier date. There was a couple quotes that I thought were funny, that I wanted to throw in here because I want to remember keep that and when we were talking about earlier, having humility, there was somebody who said that I'm willing to change my eschatology position on the way up, if and he was talking about the rapture. It was like Daddy mentioned the rapture. I'm kind of like, I'm not even sure there is such thing as a rapture until the second coming, and that's, I mean, I don't even know if that I would even call that a rapture, personally, but he, and he, that's kind of what he was saying in this thing. He was like, but I'm fully able to change my position on the way up. I'm going up. And then another thing was this 1,000 years, the millennium is the 1,000 years of peace that all Christians like to fight about. And so the sort of pointing out the irony, of it. And I thought that was a funny quote because it doesn't need to be something that we fight about. And I think that putting it in those terms is a funny way to sort of remember that. Time of woe, that was something. So let's get into implications a little bit. So how does this have implications? Because this is really what I will say that when I came to this, first of all, I had this whole project. I had two thoughts. I had a thought on the back of my mind always that, I was going to make an episode called Deconstructing Denominations, and we're going to tear apart, why do we even have denominations? What are they good for? Why, we're all Christians. We should all just get along, kumbaya. And that was going to be like a thought that I've had for a long, 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 long time. Been in several different, denominations of churches throughout my life. So I've seen a lot of different things and I'm like, I don't understand why we can't just unite, and, doing these dials has been just really amazing to like understand why it's so hard to even just have conversations when you're coming at it with a different hermeneutic, just completely different construction in your mind about how to look at this, and then the history of all that. I forgot a little bit where I was going. Sorry. Okay, so that was one thing. The other thing is I noticed that when I was raised predominantly in a dispensation. Most of America is really, just familiar with the principles of premillennial thought. The Left Behind series, we watched that when we were kids. Chloe, my oldest daughter, is named after Chloe from the Left Behind movie. That's where the first place I heard that name. I was like, oh, that's a cool name. I like that name. And that's where I got that name, from the Left Behind series. So fun fact anyway. But the thing is like, after there was a big backlash to the movie, and and I always like, okay, that was the first time I really kind of even understood there was something alternatively to this, because I've always heard, I'll fly away, oh glory, and it's just a part of just the way I imagined the whole world. So to understand that there's a different way of looking at the world. And I think I was telling Paul about this guy named Bruce Gore, he kind of grew up dispensational and taught church history and taught as a teacher in a high school. And after teaching it year after year after year, he found it harder and harder to defend these positions. And the more he's learning, he felt more inclined to go to a post-millennial position, and ended up, resigning on good terms. But, sort of just completely switching. He's fully reformed and, Presbyterian. And even though I don't hold many of those same positions, I think has been fairly clear in the series so far. I just have such an appreciation for for people that are willing to hold on to Jesus and change their mind on things about the Bible based on what they're looking at in the Bible. From one orthodox position to another orthodox position. And so that was curious to me. And one of the things that he really mentioned that I saw play out was Presbyterians and a lot of denominations that would be low on this dial are trying to build schools. They're trying to, because we're in the kingdom. If the kingdom is now and we're building this kingdom and it's going to get better and better and better until Jesus comes, what else would you be doing here other than spreading the gospel, spreading the good news, and building for the next generation? And so it's described as very optimistic view. And I just thought to myself, I was like, that's very attractive, and that was my first inclination. Now I've gone through Revelation with so many different things and just seen so many different, and positions. And one of the things that I think also really helped me actually get to the point where I could talk about this dial and have any sort of clarity of thoughts was Michael Heiser did a whole thing on Revelation. And at the end, he's like, he wouldn't give up his position going through on what his eschatology, beliefs were. It's like, I'm not going to teach you pre-mill. I'm not going to teach you post-mill. I'm not going to teach you a-mill. I'm not going to teach you any of the things going through this. We're just going to go through Revelation, look by line, and look back at the Old Testament. Where do these things come from? How would people have thought about this in the day? Just sort of historical context stuff. Got all the way to the end. And it kind of had to, when you get to chapter 20 or whatever it is with the millennium, you kind of have to show your cards a little bit. And I meant to go back and listen to the episode, but I do remember that he kind of was just, I can't be a premillennial because XYZ. And he just lays out his case for why he can't be premillennial. And then he's like, and I can't be postmillennial because XYZ. And he's like, so everybody thought for a lot of years that I was an all-millennialist, but I can't be an all-millennialist because XYZ. And he's just like, none of the systems work. All of them are broken. All of them don't make sense. All of them construct a system where you're just placing all of these things fulfilled and you're just waiting for something, but there's so much that looks like it needs to play out, or you're putting it all at the end and you're looking for all these things and a lot of it's already happened and we really should be acting like. So that was my my take on what he was saying. And honestly, it kind of confused me at first. It was kind of like, okay, you just went through and then set the book on fire. Like, I understand, but like, not the book that's in the Bible, but like set my what I constructed is like, okay, this makes sense. I'm following the logic here. And then all of a sudden it's like, poof, up in smoke. But I think in there is, to me, where I get back to this sort of progressive premillennial position as well. That's where I would be, is because I see this sort of like, whereas I think most progressive premillennials would see this already, not yet, and they would say most things in the book would be in the future. I see most of the things in Revelation are already happened, and I also hold to an early date, but I also see that they're going to take place again in a much sort of escalated version. So in the same way where you had prophecies about Solomon's going to build the temple, okay, the destruction of Jerusalem and the dispersion and all these different things, But I think you're also going to see this again. So I see but in an escalated fashion where Solomon wasn't Messiah. There was one that was much greater than him, yet to come. So that's where I fall on this as well. Oh yeah, we were going through implications. How did I go? Oh yeah, time of woe. Oh, positivity. Sorry, rabbit trailing a lot on this episode. I apologize for that. The pessimism that is inherent in premillennial positions is a lot of times because it's seen as the world's going to end soon, so we just need to convert as many people to Christ as possible. And because, in 1977, the Lord's coming back. In 1984, here's 84 reasons why the Lord's coming back. And, so there's a lot of this inclination to be short-term thought processes and making converts rather than disciples. And so that, I would say, is the downside, but it also is this urgency to actually reach the world, for the gospel and go into all the world and preach the gospel. So I think there are pros and cons to both system and implications. And I don't want to leave that out, because I think, again, I've listened to a lot of different things that are very, the post-millennial person is very hard on the premillennialist. And I'm like, man, I agree with all these premillennials, positions, and I'm like being hard on them. And then I see the premillennialists being so hard on these post-millennials, like, no, we're in the kingdom right now. I mean, like these things are, this all happened. This is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be, so because I have maybe a sort of confused eschatological position, it's very tough for me to watch a lot of these things, because I just, because of the lack of charity sometimes within the positions. So I do think we need to be optimistic. I do personally think that it's important to prepare as if your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to be walking in your legacy. I think that the Puritans, one of the historical things that I think you see the Puritans had this post-millennial mindset, and it influenced the creation of America. They built schools, they taught their kids, the shiny sitting on a hill speech. There was a lot of very, very positive things I think most Christians would say. And I think that the legacy that we're sitting here in America doing this podcast, and our heritage is directly related to these Puritans. And the Puritans kind of split into the Baptist and the Presbyterians, and the Presbyterians kind of kept the post-millennial eschatological position, and the premillennial position kind of got big around that time through the Second Great Awakening as well. Yeah, I've gone for a long time. You guys jump in. Let me collect my thoughts, because I got going too many directions. So anybody have anything on what I said so far at all? No?
You're on a roll. No,
Any
I
agreements or
I agree. I mean, I think, what you believe affects how you do things. In some ways, I look at Calvinism and wonder, like, if you believe that God, just irresistible, why would you preach to anybody, teach to anybody? Just wait for him to show up, just pray and just go. I mean,
can I jump in? I'm glad you said that. That jarred a memory. I struggled to figure that out myself. And I think this is why. Because your eschatology tells you that we're in the kingdom. The kingdom is supposed to be advancing. So you can hold these, in my mind, coming from a different tradition. Like, how do you hold this in balance? That doesn't make any sense. Like, if
yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from our perspective, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that that's why it actually does make sense, is because your eschatology dial is down here on 0. So you can be over here in this range.
Not 0, 1.
1.
Oh, no. 1, yeah.
0 is the heresy.
I exaggerate.
And I can. So let me tell you a story as to why a Calvinist would bother with evangelism. A long time ago, R.C. Sproul was in seminary, and Dr. John Gerstner was one of his professors. And there were 20 students in the room in a semicircle fashion. And Dr. Gerstner posed the question, if God has predestined us, why would we bother with evangelizing? And one by one, nobody had an answer. Just went around the room one at a time. Dr. Sproul, at the time, RC, was the last one in the semicircle, and Dr. Gerstner says, "Well, Mr. Sproul, why would we bother with evangelizing if God has preordained who He's drawing to Himself?" And very timidly, and this is a retelling of something RC is told countless times, but he said very timidly to Dr. Gerstner, "Well, I'm pretty sure this is the wrong answer, but because He's commanded us to." And I imagine, and the way Dr. Sproul tells this, I imagine Dr. Gerstner with this glorious Scottish accent, looking very much like um, Sean Connery. "Mr. Sproul, you mean to tell me the sovereign Lord of the universe that commands your election also commands your participation in the salvation of others?" "Well, yeah, but that's probably not the right answer." "Mr. Sproul, you are wrong. That is absolutely the right answer.
Yeah, I think
God's commanded it.
yeah.
That's why."
And I think because if you take the scripture series and you love Jesus, you're going to read these commandments and you will end up doing the right thing. I think sometimes we let these systems, this is my critique, get in our heads. And I think sometimes the true believer will do like you said. But I think that sometimes people in the pews will get ideas in their heads about what, and it may not play out in a way. It's almost like a subconscious, like, subconscious thing that just happens, that I may not sit there, and I didn't sit there as a child and go, my goodness, the responsibility of reaching the entire world before Jesus comes back is on my shoulders. I would never have told you that or articulated that, but I felt that. I felt the weight of that. And I felt no weight, even though I know I'm supposed to disciple people and teach them about Jesus. I am not going to, if I was a preacher at that time, if I'd have gone straight into ministry, I would have preached 1,000 sermons on come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come to Jesus, and put less emphasis on this is how you live, this is how you live, so it's an emphasis placement that is the, not that you don't preach both, you're going to preach, you should preach both. Goodness gracious, preach the whole Bible. So a couple other things. Oh, another cautionary point that I think is important to mention is when the Pharisees and the Sadducees, before Jesus came, their idea of what the Messiah was going to be, the profile that they had put together in their mind, their eschatology, if you will, because at that time, they were looking for the Messiah to bring in the kingdom. I mean, it was one of the last things the disciples asked Jesus before he went, and the ascension was, are you going to build your kingdom here? He's like, well, in the same way you see me returning, I'll come again. And it's like, okay, so what just happened? And I think that there's obviously they knew what happened. I'm exaggerating, but I think that because of the culture, there was this expectation that the Messiah was going to come in, is going to save them from the Romans, was going to, set them up and then rule the kingdoms, with this iron fist, and excuse me. And there was only a certain sort of group of people, the Essenes and certain other communities, that had a different picture of what the Messiah was actually going to be, and that there was something beyond this, but they were a minority position. I'm pretty sure John the Baptist came out of this Essene community, it was preaching the Messiah the actual true version of the Messiah that was supposed to happen, because it was there in the Old Testament. It just wasn't explicitly said. And we kind of hit on that earlier. One of the things that I think in it, oh yeah. So how did that tie into being a cautionary tale? I think that if you have such a solid expectation that Jesus is coming back, it's going to be this way, and what your expectations are, that you will miss potential signs of Jesus' second coming. They missed his first coming because they had constructed these systems, these rigid systems of what Jesus was going to come back and do. And when he didn't fit the profile of what they had put together, missed him. You know, I'm worried that sometimes with both systems, whether you just put all of it at the beginning and you're doing what you feel is the best, I just worry sometimes that we will miss the second coming, or at least signs of the second coming, and not be as good stewards of the word if we are too, dark red on this dial, in whatever your position is. You might be 100% right. If you're too dark red, I still think that you might have trouble. And that's my caution there. Another, I think, important thing to note is when John, the Apostle John, is writing the book of Revelation, he just grabs motifs willy-nilly. And I love that. I think probably a lot of Bible scholars don't like that because, Ezekiel kept his references pretty clean and clear, and you could kind of see what was going on, didn't mix metaphors. A lot of the, even Paul, you see in his work, in his writings, is very clear thoughts. John is like, he's the bread of life. He's the word, the Spirit,
Yeah.
grabbing all these motifs. And I think in the go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you making reference to the fact that he uses like bowls and then he uses
Trumpets,
yeah.
seals.
Yeah, so he uses those things, and the question always is, are these like this bowl and this trumpet the same? Or like, is this different than this one, even though they sound about the same? Wow, a bowl and a trumpet don't sound the same, but
No, I get what you're saying. Thank you for making me specify a little bit. So I can't remember if it's the trumpets, the seals, or the scrolls. Trolls. Goodness gracious. One of them are laid out in plagues. I want to say it's the seals. No, the seals are the whole thing. The bowls. I think it's the verbiage and everything follows a lot of the Exodus plagues. There's borrowed language, there's motifs that are supposed to draw your mind back to the plagues in Exodus, right? And then you get the trumpets, and it's like, okay, this is Ezekiel or whatever. Like, and I'm mixing which one it is, but they all pull from different places in the Bible, and different prophetic works in the Old Testament pulls them into it. And you're like, okay, so you just said 3 sets of things: bowls, trumpets, and what is it? The other trolls, trumpets, and bowls. And you said it different way each time. And then it, boy, it is really weird talking to no one for a second there. But yeah, so you have these 3 different things, and 3 different sets of things, and they all grab from different places, but it's all within the same storyline of the seals breaking and things happening. So it's like you cut these different scenes and you insert different places, the Old Testament, or motifs from the Old Testament. You got plagues here, you got Ezekiel here, you got some Daniel here, and you pull in all these things, and you're like, why in the world would you do? Why wouldn't you just stay consistent with something? And why did you reiterate something 3 different times? So how this plays out sometimes, if you're in the sort of dispensational timeline chronology type thing, you'd say these all go consecutive because the first seal breaks, second seal breaks, whatever. So it all seems like it's lined up in a row. if you're more of like an idealist or all millennial, you might say, okay, these things all are just retelling of the same thing, but it's just pulling in different Old Testament motifs here. So you see how you could be looking at the same thing and getting a different picture, and John just has no regard for where he's pulling these things. He obviously has a mastery of the Old Testament, a great mastery of all the prophetic works, and he's able to pull in exactly what he wants to say to convey what he wants to say, but he's just doing it in a way where it's very difficult to know,
because you're struggling with it, and it's kind of like the dream that Joseph had, that Joseph interpreted for the Pharaoh. You have 7 cows, and they're all healthy, and then 7 unhealthy cows that eat them. You have 7 wheat, and then the bad wheat, and you go like, okay, are we interpreting that way? It's kind of like, it's like the same thing. It's just saying it for emphasis. Is it like the dream interpreted by Daniel for I forget which king. But anyways, where it says, it's repetitive because it's going to surely happen. It's boom. This is a definite. It's there for emphasis.
yeah.
It will happen, and it's dramatic. Don't miss it. It's a big deal. Or do we just look at it and say, like, okay, he didn't mean it that way. It didn't have to be interpreted that way. It could be, this way. And that's where the difficulty comes, because we don't necessarily have him saying, boom, 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 this is what this means. It's sealed up.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, did you catch all that?
Yes, I just went on mute and I had to walk away for a minute.
Okay.
But I heard the whole thing.
Okay. That was good stuff. Just kidding. Okay, so I mean, I don't know how long we've been going. I think it's not been a full hour. I expected this to be excuse me, a very long conversation, just because the historical controversies, but they're all recent controversies. Maybe we should go back and talk a little through history, just cover that aspect.
I was thinking maybe, like, what is the biggest thing, even though you might personally feel there's some difficulty with your point of view, what is the main thing that you look at and you go like, this takes me in this direction and it's hard not to be over here in this camp? I maybe can't answer everything about this, or maybe you can. That would be great. But I mean, this is what kind of draws me, attracts me, that says, like, this persuades me more than the other does. And I just like to get that, from you guys. What clicks with you and says, like, that particular verse, or these particular verses, or this particular overarching principle says to me, this is the direction you ought to go.
Yeah, I'll go first because it's a great question. So one thing that I like about where I'm at on the dial currently is because I feel like it takes the Old Testament and the New Testament and the historical history of prophecy and how it's played out, this double fulfillment type thing, this missing, being, I think what I like about my position is it's able to hold these things in tension, the already but not yet. I think it does the best job of holding that. I mean, how do you solve the problem is, it was like the disciples that were there with Jesus the whole time, and he goes, is about to ascend up into the heavens, and they go, are you going to start the kingdom now? I mean, like, is this it? You're going to rule the nations? Is like, there's this all like, and he's like, yeah, I in the same way you see me leaving, I'll return again, and it's like, okay, now it's 2,000 years later. And so it's like this tension in my mind of like, what is really going on. But and I struggled with that for a long time until I realized Moses struggled with tensions of not Moses wasn't who I was thinking of, but like people in the second period post he didn't mute in the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, all of these different communities, all waiting. Anyone came back after the exile, anyone post before the exile of like, we're still waiting on Messiah. There's one thing that, oh yeah, is good to mention here too, is there's a lot I've discovered through this, my going through and trying to figure out eschatology, is there's a lot of things that are, I think we've talked about them in the scripture dial, but like extra biblical text, the deuterocanonical books, there's the testament of the patriarchs, there's writings that are supposedly associated with Adam, with Enosh, his grandson, with the writings that Jacob wrote. Of course, we don't have a book of Jacob, but there's supposedly a testament of Jacob. And some of these fragments and things are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are before Jesus came. So anyone reading these things would have had, whether they believe that actually came from them or not, you get the sense of their writings and their commentary about it, that they actually believe that this is what Adam thought, that Adam thought that the world was going to end in a flood and it was going to end in fire. How that made sense, they didn't know, but they thought that Adam had prophesied that to his sons and passed that on. And so there's this, there's a body of work, so to speak, just like we have Augustine, Calvin, Luther, we have all of these church fathers, that we look to like understand, okay, what did the apostles mean? What did Paul mean when he said this? How did they understand these things? How did, we have a whole dial on this series about how these things were understood through history. Well, the Pharisees, all of these people had these same similar things. You could have written the Jewish dials before Christianity existed, before Jesus came, and you had, okay, the Essenes are up here on this one, the Pharisees are down here on this one. You could have had the same sort of thing, because there's all these camps and thought on how you think about God, how do you think about the Messiah, how do you think about the Holy Spirit? There seems to be these two, Jesus is speaking to, or God is speaking to someone and putting it on the same level in, I think it's I think it's Psalm. There's a Psalm. It's like, well, who's he talking to? He's, it's like, are there two gods? Is God two people? Like, so there was an idea of this Trinitarian thought process even before, the day of Pentecost, so to speak.
Yeah,
so,
where he says, my Lord said to my Lord, like, what? David said to my Lord, who's talking to, kind of thing. Yeah.
All these years later, we can read that and understand it. Okay, this is the Trinity going on, but they would have to wrestle with these things in a way, to categorize it and make it make sense. So all that to say is why I feel very good about where I'm at on this dial is because just looking at what they would think and how they interpret it, how that played out, and where I see patterns emerging, and I'm able to hold these things very loosely. And I honestly don't want to be so high up on this dial where I'm just, everything's off into the future and this is system and I'm looking for these different things. I don't think that historically has made a lot of sense, even though there were plenty of premill. And that was another thing too. I thought that everybody says that, was it Darby came up with premillennialism like 100 years ago, whatever. And it's like, no, there was people in the apostles' day that were saying things that would sound like what a premillennialist would say today. I mean, they had this sort of like split eschatology too as well. And some people say that Paul, like his early writings, like his early letters, there was this imminence that Jesus is coming back. And as you get to some of the letters that he wrote later, there's a less I don't want to say urgency, but sort of a recognition that, this is a big task to reach all the nations for the Lord here. This is a lot bigger task than, is just going to be accomplished, in the immediate future. So you see almost a change there. And people have noticed that. I don't necessarily know if that is, I mean,
I'm
I think we
curious
change
where
our style
Paul
as
is
we
now.
mature and get older. So I don't know if that's just a function of that. So, but just an interesting point there. But yeah, did I answer your question? Sorry, I rambled again.
Yeah, you did, and I'd like to hear what
Yeah, Paul.
by Paul, what grabs you.
So I grew up dispensational. At I think the age of 10 or 12, I was handed Hal Lindsey's late great Planet Earth. Don't do that to your kids. Don't do that to your grandkids. Those things that book gets handed out with the best of intentions, but please don't do that to your kids or grandkids. Um, um, I read the first book in the Left Behind series. Probably within a year or two of the first book's publication, and at that point I checked out. Like, no, this is, yes, I get it's a work of fiction, but your theological underpinnings are the work of more sensationalism than actual good quality study. I can't. I get that dispensationalism is, considered orthodox in evangelical circles. It is the dominant. It is the dominant position. I can't understand how it gets the dominant position it does. Um, I moved for a couple of years away from dispensationalism to amillennialism, and then landed with partial preterism. One of the things that was um, one of the things that moved me out of um, premillennialism, or dispensationalism, was and this is one of the things that attracted me to amillennialism and in general postmillennialism, is what's the book of Revelation about? um, what's the whole point? And I heard a couple of elders at my church years ago were going to go through the book of Revelation, and they asked one of the pastors, well, what's the book of Revelation about? Give us some starting place to work from. And the pastor said, open your Bible and turn to Revelation chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. And he said, now read that, and I'll read that. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus, even to all that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and keep what is written in it, for the time is near. So that was not something I'd heard before. Revelation was always about, three numbers on your wrist or on the back of your hand or on your forehead, and the the beast, or the mark of the beast, and the man of sin, and the Antichrist, and we got all that, and but something about your starting point as the book is about Jesus revealing himself to his people, and he's doing it to offer comfort for things that must soon, not 2,000 years in the future, but must soon come to pass. Um, and for me, it was, oh, I need to be looking, like every other book in the Bible, I need to be looking for Jesus. I I don't need to look for um, dates or timelines or charts or graphs. I need to look for Jesus. I don't need, there are things that God has said he wants us to know. He gave us a book. Um, so clearly there are things God wants us to know. But there are things that either we can't know, we shouldn't know, or we're not capable of knowing, at least not in our finite form. Which is where faith comes in. At some point, we have to trust that God knows what he's doing and shouldn't really explain it to us. What he does explain to us and give us is his mercy and grace, but God owes us no explanation. So once I realized, oh, I need to look for Jesus in the book of Revelation, it made Revelation started making more sense. Looking at eschatology was less about the Russians than Chinese coming after us, and more about Jesus provides for his people, regardless of the situation. Um, and so that's what drew me into general postmillennialism, um, and which is kind of why I've stayed there.
Yeah. I'd be curious, Dad, why you same thing. Kick the question back to you. You're muted.
Hey.
There you go.
Hi. Yeah, and that's the most challenging thing is anything that says, soon these things and the expectations of the early church for those things to be fulfilled. The difficulty I have though is with what is said in Revelation, which is said in Matthew 24.
The Olivet Discourse, yeah.
Yeah. Is the level of what is said will happen doesn't seem to be to the level of what has happened. I could look at like a couple events that are fairly close time wise in history. You see Napoleon marching across the world, across Europe. Just the massive number of people killed by Napoleon. World War One, it bumps it up from that. Massive number of people. World War II bumps it up from there. Then communism bumps it up from there. The people that have died, and I'm thinking like, has anything previously like compared to those? And I don't think that those are like fulfilling quite what Revelation is saying. As horrible as those events are, and the number of people who died, and the horror of those wars and those regimes in China, in Laos, and places. So I just see something coming in the future that makes all of those seem small, and I can't see where something worse than that happened in 70 AD. I see 70 AD as being small potatoes compared to what happened. And I don't even feel like those things are the fulfillment of what is mentioned, throughout the Bible as far as what judgment is about to befall, and what the mark of the beast, what the beast and the prophet and all of those characters in the Bible are. I just don't see clearly anyone that fills those things, even though maybe Nero's name somehow can be made out to be 666 or 616, depending on, whether you're using Hebrew or Greek. I just don't see it. So I'm looking for something in the future that fulfills, Revelation. And I don't know how to explain the soon thing. I'm
Yeah,
looking in there. It's
I
like
can.
there's some places says, like, uh, but wait, there's more. I'm gonna look in Revelation and find that, because this soon doesn't seem to be like everything in Revelation is going to be soon, or is it just like the letters and where they're going and a few things? I don't know how to explain it. It's
Yeah,
it's a mystery, which is where we started at the beginning of this
it is
show,
a
and maybe we ought to wrap it up because it is a mystery. Don't know how.
yeah. So I'll give some last thoughts, and you guys can give some last thoughts, and we'll take it out.
But
Um,
before that,
Go ahead.
as any good Westerner, I do have a quantifiable answer for that mystery question you had.
A
Okay.
quantifiable answer. Okay.
Yes. I'm mostly kidding. I do have one, but I'm mostly just making fun of my own Westernness.
Okay.
So that's all.
Oh, that was the joke. Okay, I was like,
That
wait.
was the joke.
Okay, I was still waiting for a joke. Okay.
That
I
was
missed
the
the
joke.
punchline.
Yeah, I got it after I was like, what? Okay, all right, cool. Again, some of this implications, I think, there, if you're in the post millennial camp, it's very easy to have this replacement theology, right? So that the because pretty much the baton, so to speak, is handed off to the Gentiles,
Church.
right? And that the church is going forth, and so we're waiting for the second coming, and the church is supposed to go out and grow, and it's supposed to be Jews and Gentiles, and going forth and everything. But there is no reason to have sort of this the Jewish state. It serves no purpose in your eschatological position to have a Jewish state. Whereas the premillennial position, it is almost everything to have a Jewish state because it's the only way that any of this stuff makes any sense. Because it's talking about the desolation of oscuration. What?
Abomination of desolation, or
Yeah,
that
that one.
causes desolation, depending on how you read it.
And so because we know historically what that meant, it's important to have these things. So you're forced into not forced into, but these do have implications, right? I think that you're seeing today with what's happening in Israel, you have a lot of premillennialists, and it's a very dominant thing in Christianity, is like we have to support Israel no matter what. No matter what, they could be raining down bombs on, we're going to get controversial. I don't want to get controversial with this, not at all. But I do think that I want to point out that this has very real consequences in our society. And I think you have people that are on the other side, that in the post-millennial camp, that it doesn't matter. They look at the situation completely different. And just more from a moralistic standpoint, is this right or wrong? And so I think that's part of it. I think that the other tendency you could have is, I think there's a lot of okay, so we're going back to pros and cons here. I think there's a lot of positive things that the optimistic view of the post-millennial uh camp gets. They get to see that the church is coming, is growing and growing, and it will go into this millennial reign, and it's very optimistic. There is no coming woe. We don't have to worry about a lot of those things. And so, but I think the danger could be, and I think the Puritans had a great balance with this, but I think that there's a possibility of going into this sort of nationalistic mentality where we're supposed to go forth, and governments bend to the church. It can be a danger there. And then you also have it can also be a very liberal point of view as well, because you can get to a place where sorry, I'm gonna have to put a pin in that and come back to it, because I really lost my thought big
Is
time.
your thought have something to do with like evolution? We're getting better, type thing. Man
Potentially.
is getting better, and
That's
situations getting better
interesting.
because we've evolved. We've gotten smarter. We're better than previous previous generations or whatever.
Yeah, that's not uncommon in postmillennialism, where we culturally we will improve, not necessarily, and certainly from Christians, you would never hear them say from our own effort, but the advancing the gospel is evidenced in how people interact with each other, how cultures shift and change, how more Christian-ish a culture becomes is seen as evidence of the advancement of the gospel.
Right. And I think the other, now pre-mill, take a shot at them for a second, is because like I said, the state of Israel can kind of do no wrong. There's a tendency for this nationalistic impulse, I think, as well there. But I think it's coming from a different place. So there's, I think, potentially dangerous implications there, in my mind, at least. And if not dangerous, I think very real practical implications in our society. And so that's something that this touches. Another thing is heaven. What it is Jerusalem coming down, the new Jerusalem, all of these things that it paints theirs. What is your idea of heaven? N.T. Wright talks a lot about this, is that he's a millennialist, and so he kind of has this that we're in the kingdom now, and so they're starting to take place, this that earth and heaven are going to merge back into one thing, and that earth will be made over after the second coming to the way God intended it, with the Garden of Eden and man having dominion over the whole earth. Whereas, which is sort of very optimistic for all millennials, but it does impact your view of heaven. And I think a lot of premillennialists tend to go in this direction where the world's going to get worse. There's going to be this destruction. There's going to be these plagues on this, like the third of the population is going to be destroyed. There's comets going to be hit. Wormwood is going to destroy and take us all out. And that can play also into your how you view climate change. Because what does it matter? We're all going to be poofed off this planet in the rapture, and so all this bad times is for somebody else. It doesn't have anything to do with me. That's where I was going. I think sometimes in our politics, this plays in. It's very easy to have a liberal perspective on a lot of things when I hate to say this, but when you have to take care of the planet, you're putting, churches and schools and building out things and all these, and you have to be very involved in government. When you have a very temporary mindset, it's a lot easier to be like an AOC, like a flamethrower, bomb dropper, kamikaze, Tea Party, trying to pass the blame to everybody, is real holdout for your position, and dug in. When no, man, this is getting too controversial. I'm trying not to be controversial, but I'm also trying to show how I think that this stuff plays into people's thinking. And there's I don't think anybody before Aristotle really championed the idea that we become one with like the spirit world after we die, and we're floating ethereal beings. Everybody, early Jewish thought at least, is you went to Sheol. There was Abraham's bosom. It was a physical place you went to when you died. It was a part of earth. It was below the depths of the ocean. Of course, I think when in our modern world, when we see that, okay, we're on a globe, and so the cosmology of the universe doesn't match necessarily what, and again, this is controversial, man, trying not to be controversial, but when the map doesn't, when there's no pillars in holding up the sky or the planet and Sheol, you can't imagine that. Maybe that's in the Earth's core, or maybe it's just some other place off in space. You start getting into this place where I think we've
Is that-
borrowed a lot of Aristotle's ideas on the premillennial side of what heaven is, and I think that takes us to a different place as well. So all of these preconceived ideas and can come into play. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I wonder how much the Renaissance paintings and just the idea of spiritual beings, and how do you show that? You put halos on, and then that, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes because we have a picture and we've grown up with that picture, we have then a misconstrued idea. Angels have wings. We're going to be angels when we die. All this stuff that isn't true, but that's what we see in pictures. Somebody dies, and you see the angel go up in the cartoons with a little halo. um, so yeah, I think our idea of heaven and things can be influenced by, may have been Aristotle or somebody else, and then just how do we show this, and then this caught on. This is the way we show these things. As well. I'm not sure quite how we got off onto that from eschatology.
Well, it's the future, the end times. What's going to happen next? Heaven, where are we going? What is our purpose here? What is the mission? All this stuff really plays in, and it's funny because all the other dials are historical. I mean, obviously the church, you kind of understand that, you kind of pick a place on it, and you can get pretty comfortable and understand sort of the pros and the cons of that dial. Being too high or too low on it, or in the middle, and what the drawbacks may be there. You could say on scripture as well, you want to be here, you don't want to be here, kind of see the controversies, and then you also kind of have to acknowledge the symbolism and all these different things, so you kind of see how that all works out. And I think there's a real comfortable place that you could get and live with people and your neighbors and stuff there. And then you have your the God dial, like and we talked about free will, and that whole dynamic there. And then we talked about the gifts of the Spirit, and I think that one and this one are connected in some way, because let's just say that well, I'm gonna have to cut this out because again, I gotta go too many directions. Oh well.
Edit before that, right?
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to wrap it up here. Well, yeah, so we're gonna give closing thoughts. I think that's what we're up for next. We got a little bit going down a rabbit trail, and I couldn't finish. What are you guys' closing thoughts on this dial? And as we close out this series, anything guys?
I was gonna say, I appreciate you taking on this subject and all, and it's helped me to look at the topic and my views, and what is problematic with my view, and why am I here, and why do I hold this particular view. So it's maybe look at that and understand it a little better. It also makes me kind of hold that view a little looser, because there are problems, and I think in all of them. And so it is, I like that we started off talking about it's a mystery, and I think that's where we should end. It is a mystery. There's difficulty in understanding exactly what's going to happen. And I think the danger is, as you mentioned when you were talking about, and Paul both, about like the late great Planet Earth, Hal Lindsey, Left Behind, those type of things. Sometimes we've seen in those books and in some of the teaching that we've heard in Sunday school and in church at times, placing those things as specific things. Somebody mentioned, barcodes initially. That's how 666 came about. Barcodes. That was the thing. Well, now it's a QR code, right? It's a chip. It's implanted, type thing.
Before that, it was your social security number.
There you go. Hey, I believe it. You know, and that's true. Uh, but what if those things pass away? When you get that specific, what happens when somebody points out is, people used to believe this, just like people used to believe that, disease was caused by, demons or something, or, now we know it's germs. Well, and so it's that, it's sometimes being so specific and trying to say, and and I think, there's a certain thing to saying, like, okay, we look at eschatology, and now it's past 1948, and Israel's now a nation, so it's possible for this to happen. There is a type of weapon that could cause people to just turn into blubber and have there be blood up to a horse's bridle that didn't exist before. So we could see where that could happen. The the problem is saying that that is how it's going to happen. I know it because, of this thing. Well, that bomb may not work, or whatever, specific thing was said. So, we have to be careful about those things. But, it's a mystery, and it shouldn't keep us from, searching and praying for insight, and um, trusting that everything is God's hands. God knows what's going to happen. And when it's completely revealed, we'll say, yes, that is so. Amen.
Yeah, thank you. Paul, any closing thoughts or remarks on this whole series and specifically this one?
I don't have anything new that hasn't been said about the series. But where I would close out this episode, I'd like to just read some excerpts from Revelation 21 and 22. Um, and these excerpts specifically are Jesus through the Apostle John focusing and centering our hope. It's not on correctly identifying who the Antichrist is, or what the mark of the beast is going to look like. We can all agree that in some way the children of the people of God are marked differently than the people of Satan. And whether that's a physical mark or a spiritual mark, um, those are two very differently marked people groups. But here, just in these few passages, I think Jesus is trying to center our hope, center our attention on um, Him revealing Himself. And I'll just start in chapter 21. Then I, John, saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage. I will be his God, and he will be my son. And then in chapter 22, starting in verse 6, and Jesus said to me, this is John again, these words are trustworthy and true, and the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show servants what must soon take place. And behold, I'm coming soon. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of this prophecy of this book. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I had heard and saw them, I fell down and worshipped at the feet of the angel who showed them to me. But he said to me, You must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers, the prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God. A little further down, Jesus says, Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you that about these things for the churches. I am the root, the descendant of David, the bright morning star. The Spirit and the bride say, Come. And let the one who hears say, Come. And let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who desires to take the water of life without price. He who testifies to these things says, Surely I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. The grace of Lord Jesus be with you all, and amen.
And amen.
I guess we'll wrap up my final thoughts here. This series has stretched me a lot. I've gone into corners of Christianity and sometimes heresies along the way to try to figure out, make some distinguishing things. This has been one of the most amazing journeys for the last 2 months. And I'm really excited. I hope that all of this gets to the point where it's coherent. And that will be our next episode. We'll be trying to put together the total outline, a total recap, just as we did the intro video, kind of intro did it. We're going to do an outro video and we're going to recap it. We're going to just list the highs and lows, pros and cons, whatever, kind of mention the history, lay it out. And I've got a document going right now that, we'll go through everything, hopefully in a very organized way. So next episode will be a lot more organized. It'll be a lot less brainstormy, and a lot more of an outline. So that is to be looked forward to, and that hopefully will be the bones or the skeleton of what will turn into the book. And so just thank you for coming on this journey with us. If you have been through this, I appreciate it greatly, and we will see you next time.
Okay.
Allie wasn't raptured.
What? Left behind. We thought you were raptured, and we got left behind.
No. I want to be left behind. I don't want to get raptured. That you end up going to a bad place that way.
You fell in love with Jacqueline? You like the other. You said I fell in love with Jacqueline. I've done that 5 other times, but this time was different. And you spelled different with a B. Wow. Do you have dyslexia? Yeah. Like actually? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I'm glad you overcame it.